Hi there and welcome to the Dress Sew Along. This pattern is for woven fabrics. We have a 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on most seams, but anything that requires a facing or a bag out, we're going to drop that down to 6mm or 1/4 of an inch just to make it a little bit easier. So I'm sewing with 100% cotton for view A and a summer weight linen for view B. And we can just jump straight in to starting on the bodice. We are going to sew the bodice darts to begin with. Now if you don't like gathering, this is not the pattern for you, but it's a very effective sew. Also, the other thing with this pattern is you can actually just sew it with 2 layers, so you can drop off the bottom the bottom panel if you don't want the extra length in this. That will just give you a slight dropped high-low effect and won't give you the midi, and the pattern will finish above the knee. So let's start on those darts. We have 2 front pieces cut on the fold. One's going to be the outside and one's going to be the lining, because this is self-fabric lined. Choose whichever one you want before you begin. I don't know, maybe you have a nap or a flower or something that you need to place correctly, so just choose which one you want to be the outer side, and make sure you know which is which, or you could wait till you finish the darts and do it then. So we are going to sew the darts into the side seam here. So what you need to do is locate your drill hole, and my drill hole is here, marked by a pin. I'll just put it on the back so I know where it is. So take your front piece, fold it right side together at the side seam and match the notch position for the darts, like so. So we're going to sew from the dart notch here all the way across to the drill hole here. The pattern is marked to sew 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch past the drill hole. So what we do is we start on the notch here and imagine a straight line to 1 centimetre past that position there. So place the drill hole right on the fold of your fabric, making sure those notches match, and start off with a small back tack. So I'm just going to imagine a line directly to 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch past that drill hole position. And I'm going to stop my dart right on the edge, and then just repeat that 3 more times. So we need to repeat this on both of the front pieces, and I won't bore you with showing you all 4. I'll just go ahead and do those and we can move straight ahead. So when you have those darts completed, go to your iron and press them down. So we want the fold facing towards the waist area. Okay, take your front and place it right side up, and take your back piece and place it right side down and match the side seams here. So on the side seam you'll find a notch, and that notch matches to where you've sewn the dart underneath. So place that down and then sew that seam at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. And then sew the other side, so just flip it over and sew the other side. Now there's no need to overlock this seam because this is going to be fully enclosed. Repeat for the other front, so get your other set, do exactly the same thing, and then go to your iron and press those seams open like that. Right, so now we've got 2 entire fronts that are exactly the same. We want to put them together, matching right sides together. So make sure one is right side out and the other is right side in, and match them. So what we want is the darts sitting on top of each other and everything side seams matching. So if you need to, pin the side seams together so that they are exactly on top of each other. And we're going to do what's called a bag out to the upper area of this garment, so the armholes and the straps. So starting one side of an armhole, we're going to bag this out. We're going to bag it out at 6mm, so that's 1/4 of an inch, and that just helps us so we don't have so much trimming to do on the curves if you find that they are buckling a bit. So I'm going to start just one side of that side seam on the curved neckline. I'm going to do just a small back tack, and I'm going to stitch around this, making sure it matches at 1/4 of an inch, 6mm. So to get a nice sharp point at the strap, the petal part, stop 6mm, 1/4 of an inch before the end with your needle down, lift your presser foot, turn and pivot, and then just continue stitching. I haven't quite gone far enough, so I'll do one more stitch. There we go. Okay, so when you get to the end, just double check that you haven't skipped any places. By that I mean we've got to be quite accurate with our cutting, so sometimes you can mismatch. Just double check before you go to the effort of turning this through that everything's sewn nicely, all the layers are sewn together, and then we're going to turn it through. So you need to push these through, and this can be a tad challenging, but just take your time, and when we push it through we want to make sure all those points are turned out properly. So when you've turned them through, go to your iron and give just the strap part a press, because we want to do some pin stitching, which some people call understitching, on the wrong side to create roll, and that's easier to do if you haven't ironed it. It just gives you a bit more flexibility. So just go to your iron and iron the upper part of the strap flat. Okay, so I've pressed these, and I've got my garment sitting right side out, so if you need to choose which is the right side out, make sure the right side is out now. The other thing I should have said, if you have heavier fabric you might like to have snipped, just trim that corner point before you turn it through. So now we need to do some pin stitching to create roll. As I mentioned, some people call that understitching, and we need to do this at the underarms, the centre back, which is the lower part, and the centre front, and it'll just make sure that our lining doesn't show through. Probably not so important because this is self fabric line, but just say you chose to use a different colour. So with our understitching, what we want to do is just make sure we do it from the same position to the same position. So what I like to do is just put a little marking point where I think I need to go. You don't need to go all the way up into the straps, so just below is fine. So just make sure the position is, it doesn't need to be perfect. It'll just help ease your mind if you're a bit of a perfectionist, that everything is in the right place and looks nice, because there's no point sewing if we're not going to have it look nice on the inside as it is on the outside. So there we are. I'm marking the neckline and the armholes. And then the front neck, which is higher. I'm just sort of eyeballing it, making sure it's around about parallel. So when we're wearing it, it'll look the same. I mean, you can fold it, make sure they're perfect if you want to. Alright, so when we understitch, we want to understitch on all the bulk on the inside of the garment. So let's demonstrate this at the underarm. So I have this garment back up. So I'm going to open this up and come to the area where the pin is and rearrange my work. So making sure I am only going to be stitching through what I need to, push all the bulk towards the lining piece, and then starting at that pin, just do a small back tack to begin. Now the width we're going to stitch this is pin width, so it's 1 millimeter, which is probably 1/16 of an inch in from the seam line, and that's why I said don't iron it, because it gives you a chance to really push that open. Now on domestic machines you can get a very clever little foot that will put the guideline for you and stitch the needle in exactly the right place. It's a very, if you're going to get a presser foot, that's one of the presser feet to get. So I'm just going to start with a small back tack and then just stitch through, remembering we're stitching through all the bulk. So all of that seam pushed up. Which is the reason as well that we opened up those side seams with our iron, just to make it easier. So here are our side seams here. And you can skip this step if you want to. And stitch as far as you can, which is ideally up to your pin position, and then back tack. You will find you're limited by the strap width. So what happens there is that will just help push the lining to the inside. So now we have to repeat that for the other armhole and the front neckline and the back neckline, and I won't bore you with sewing that, I'll just skip straight ahead. Okay, so this is my bodice with the iron, so it's all been pressed. As you can tell, this is all pushing nicely to the inside. So this is the View A bodice ready to have the lower tiers attached to it. Oh, and I should have mentioned that the tiers on View A and B are interchangeable, so you can either have 2 layers, two rows is the word I'm struggling to find, or you could have the 3 rows, or you could skip the bottom tier and just have 2 rows or 1 row, if that makes any sense at all. Right, talking around in circles, let's just move on. For View B bodice, take the front and locate the drill hole here, and just like we did for View A, fold your fabric right side together so that that drill hole is right on the fold and that our notches are sitting on top of each other. Now I'm just going to turn it over. So when you're ready, we are going to sew from the notch position, and we're going to imagine a straight line directly to 1 centimetre past the drill hole. If you need to, you could get some chalk and draw a line. Just remember we need this drill hole to be right on the edge. And all we do is just imagine a straight line to it. And then just back tack at the edge. So now you need to repeat this 3 more times. So we need to do it for both the front piece and the front lining piece. So there's 2 darts, 1 on each side. And then go to your iron and press that dart so it faces towards the hemline. Take your back and place it right side up, and take your front and place it right side down, and we're going to sew the side seam. So sew the side seam at 1 centimetre. And then sew the other side seam. And go ahead and repeat this for the lining piece front and back. And when you've done that, go to your iron and press those seams so they're sitting open and nice and flat, like that. Okay, so choose one of the set of bodices to be the outside, and we're going to put a loop on it. So this is going to have a button and loop closure at the top. Now I like using this bridle loop tape, I just find it really easy. You can use whichever sort of loop you prefer. You could even make a self-woven one if you liked. So this is the right side. So what I'm going to do is just stitch it here, and our hem allowance here, seam allowance here is 6mm, 1/4 inch all round. So you need to make sure that this is going to be hidden within that hem allowance. So this is the right side, and when this is sewn together it's going to turn like that when we bag it out. So when you're ready, just take your loop or place your loop. So you need to make sure this is just over 6mm. You want it at the top corner, so just over 1/4 inch down and in, like so. You could even make it 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch if you prefer. And I'm just going to tack stitch that down so it will just be enclosed when I go to bag this out. Okay, so that is, oh that's cool, I don't know why that has, I'll have to sort that out. So that is on the left hand side as you wear it. Okay, so place one of the fronts inside the other front and make sure they're right sides together, and we're going to work on this centre back opening. So what we're going to do is match the centre back slash. I might just turn it over and sew it from the other side. We're going to match the centre back slash, and we're going to sew these pieces together. So we're going to sew it at 6mm, 1/4 inch down, and we're going to graduate our line when we sew until we stop 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch past the bottom of the slash. So we want just a nice gentle straight line to that point there. So when you get to that point there, stop with the needle down in your work, lift, turn and pivot and rearrange it. And we're going to sew up the other side of the V at the centre back till we get to the top. So if you're like me and you've used some bridle loop, just make sure that that is enclosed. So clearly I haven't quite done it there. I'll just go over that again. It is quite easy to make roulet loops out of a tiny bit of bias cut fabric. So you want your loop to be on the edge like that. So we'll come over and reinforce the bottom of this shortly. I'm just going to snip a little bit further down just to make it easier to turn. So we'll just run a line of bar tacking, which is basically close zigzag, at the bottom of that later, just to reinforce that area. Okay, so before we go any further, we now need to work on the straps. So here are the straps. We have 8 of them. We're going to be sewing them in 2s. Take a pair of straps and place them right side together, and we're going to leave the straight edge free for turning. What we're going to do is just sew down one side up to the point and back again. Now if you have slightly thicker fabric, you might find it easy just to trim the top of that off like that before you turn it. So turn this through, repeat it 3 more times until we have 4 straps, and make sure you give them a good press. When you have your 4 straps turned out and pressed, and make sure when you press with the seam right on the edge, we're going to stitch these into the bodice area. So let's start here. So this is the front, and if we have a look, there's a small notch on each of these pieces here. What we need to do, making sure our bodice is still right sides together, so the bodice and the self bodice lining, put a strap inside, and we want to have it with the flat edge at the top, and you want to match that folded edge, that edge that we've pressed there to the notch like so. We need to make sure we have our 6mm 1/4 inch gap on this side. Make sure it's all nice and straight, and then I'm just going to run a small tack stitch within the seam allowance to hold that into place. If you wanted to, you could put the other piece, if it's the lining or the main, it depends which way up you're sewing, on top and tack stitch it like that, up to you. So make sure you do the strap on the side of the front and then the strap on the other side of the front. And then we'll do them for the back as well. So turn it over and you'll see a notch in the same position at the side of the arm for the back. And on the other side of the back. Okay, so now we're going to sew around the entire top of the back, starting at the back split. So starting at the back split, in a 6mm seam allowance, which is 1/4 inch, just sew all the way around. Now as you go, match the notches and make sure that the straps are out of the way, so you're only sewing through what you need to. Okay, so turn that through and give it a really good press. Now, one thing I forgot to mention when we're tack stitching those straps in, the shorter straps go to the front, which is the higher edge, and the longer straps go to the back, which is the lower edge. Before we attach the bodice to the skirt part of the garment, I'm just going to run a small bar tack at the bottom of the back split. A bar tack is basically a very narrow stitch zigzag for reinforcing. So it's I've set this on 3.5 with 1.6 mil length. I don't know what that is converted, but all it's going to do is almost like a buttonhole, just gives you a narrow reinforcing area. So I'm going to do it around about, it's around about 1 centimetre long. So if you just start at the very bottom and you want the left stitches to sit right on that folded edge. So just like this. I mean, it could be 6 mil, 1/4 inch if you want. You could have it really small. Just gives extra strength to that back opening area. And don't forget now to go ahead and sew a button of your choice onto this part here. So if you want to, go ahead and tie the straps now, and you can work on the next part of the garment, which is the skirt. So now let's work on the larger skirt with the pockets for view A. So we have 2 pairs of pockets. We've cut 2 out this way and 2 out that way. So we just need 1 set of them to start with. And then we have 2 of this piece to sew it to, cut on the fold, so we only need 1 of them. So take 1 of them and place it right sides up. And take a pocket and place it right side down so it matches. And then we're going to come down the side seam and find our notches. And the notches will show us the position that we're going to sew the pockets to. Oh, there we are there. So that notch there matches the notch on the pocket there, which is around about 1.5 centimetres, 9/16 of an inch from the top there. And then the notch here, in the same position, matches to the notch here. So place those in the correct position, and accuracy is really important at this stage. And what we want to do is sew a seam at 1 centimetre and 3/8 of an inch. So we want to start exactly opposite the top notch and stop exactly opposite the bottom, like so. Now take your snips and cut on an angle up and stop just before the end of the stitching. So here's my stitching, and I want to stop 1 millimetre, which is about 1/16 of an inch. And now what I'm going to do is pin stitch just in from the edge, just like we did earlier. Now you can skip this step if you don't feel you need to. This will just help that pocket roll. So go and iron it. When you iron it, give it a press to the inside. What we want to be doing is pushing these seams out that we snipped, like so. So you want to create a little dog leg. Like that. So I'll just go and jump ahead and do that for the other 3 pockets. Okay, so what we're going to do now is place these on top of each other and match them right sides together. So we're going to match the pockets, and we're going to sew around the curve of the pocket, matching the double notch as we go. Oh, here it is down here. Make sure those the single notch matches there. If it was a double, it's a single. And we're going to sew that seam at 1 centimetre. Okay, so I've gone to my overlocker and secured that edge. Now you only need 3 threads, but I used 4 because I like the look of 4. And then when you've done that on that side, repeat it on the other side. Right, so when you have both pockets sewn together, come to the side like this and place the pocket to the front. Now, the side you place it to is going to be the front of your garment, so if you've got a pattern you need to match or anything, make sure that that is done the correct way. Then what we're going to do is sew and finish off the side seams. So when we do this, we're going to sew from the top here down to around about 1 centimetre past that notch position. You can go less as long as you cover it slightly. And then we're going to back tack off, and we're going to leave all this area free, and we're going to start again here. And when you do it, you need to make sure that all these bits you clipped are pushed out. So rearrange it before you begin. Now go to your overlocker and overlock down that entire edge. So this is what you're looking for, and now we're going to repeat it on the other side. You just have to make sure on this side that you put the pocket to the front as well. So we want both of the pockets at the front. And normally seam direction does matter, but I don't actually think it's going to on this, so I'm going to sew it from the bottom. So this is our pocket tier completed. Now if you don't want to have the tier on below it, you can just simply overlock and turn up a 1 centimetre hem allowance now before we do the gathers, and if you do want to attach the extra panel, just watch on. So go ahead and apply fusible interfacing to your hem facing pieces. This is a great design effect to have the deep hem, and it looks just quite nice and chunky, especially if you're sewing this in just a plain colour linen or cotton. Gives it a nice design effect. So the front and back hem, so the front hem curves down from the centre and the back hem curves up from the centre. So it didn't get confusing, what I've done is put a small notch at the side seam. So place these right sides together and you'll know they're correct when the notches match, like so. And the notch will be placed so that it looks like you're not matching the edges of the fabric. That's fine. We want to make sure this seam hits exactly at the sew line of 1 centimetre. So just stitch a seam in there at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. You want that to be a seamless transition there. So repeat that on the other side, and then go to your iron and press that seam open. Come to your overlocker, and it's really important now that you find the side with the notch in it. So when we overlock tidy the edge, we are not doing the one with the notch or the double notch in it. We're doing the opposite one. You don't have to serge overlock this. You could just sew a narrow hem down on the edge. So you could turn that under 5mm, 1/4 of an inch if you wanted to, and just run a small hem on the edge if you wanted. So put your facing piece away for a moment while we deal with the lower tier. So the first thing we need to do is take our front and back pieces, and we're just going to overlock in a single layer the sides. So do both of these straight sides on each of the front and back pieces. So we want to put these pieces together. So place the front right side up, so the straight edge is at the top and the curved edge is at the bottom. And you know it's the front because it curves from the middle downwards towards the side seam. And then take the back piece and place it right side down with the straight edge at the top and match it like so. And you'll know you have the right edge because there is a notch to match that you'll be able to see through your overlocking as you sew. Now I did make a note on the information sheet, if you want to change the length of this garment, you can certainly change the length in any way you want, but because of the tiers you're better off deciding how much you want to remove. Say you want to remove 3 centimetres, take it off the straight, take a third of that off each of the layers. So if you're sewing the 3-layered skirt, you want to take 1 centimetre off the top of each layer. If you're sewing a 2-layer, you'll want to take probably 1.5 off the bottom and then 1.5 off the top layer. So you just want to make sure if you are changing this, just to not play around with those proportions too much, or what's going to happen is your tiers are going to look slightly off. So when you're ready, we're going to sew a seam at 1 centimetre on the sides. And repeat this on the other side. Okay, so go to your iron and press that open, and then we'll be able to sew the hem into place. So once you've pressed that open, we're going to match our facing that we did earlier to this. So match the side seams and match the curves. So pin the side seams together and make sure that when you come to the centre you will have a notch that matches, so here to here, it's a join position. And at the other side seam there'll be another match point. And at the centre back you'll have notches to match as well. So make sure when you match your facing that the single notch at the centre of the front matches and the double notch at the centre of the back matches, and that you've matched the side seams as well. Then it's just a matter of sewing this together. The seam allowance for this is 6mm, 1/4 of an inch, because this is a facing. Okay, so if you want to, you can pin stitch that. I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is go to my iron and press that all the way up, and then we can stitch down the hem. Here is my facing all pressed up. So what I'm going to do now is stitch the hem into place. So making sure the side seam is on the side seam, stitch a line to hem directly on top of that overlocking line. And hem facings are really good if you've got a curved hem that's such a deep curve you'll get tunnelling if you just did a turn up hem. And this gives a really nice design effect too. Now what's happened with my fabric here is the heat from the steam has made my cotton contract, so I'm having a different rate of shrinkage between my fused piece and my non-fused piece, so I'm just going to gently ease that out so we don't get any tunnels. Right, so now our hem's done, all that's left is the gathering. I'm going to gather the lower skirt and attach it to the part with the pockets on first, and then I'm going to attach that to the bodice. You can do this in whatever order you choose. Okie dokie. I'm not going to go into great details about gathering. It is what it is. You run a tacking stitch thread. So what we do is, when our needle is threaded, there we go, we make a stitch length longer than normal, and there's various ways of doing this. Some people like to run 2 rows of gathering stitches. I only run 1. It's entirely up to you. You could use a gathering foot if you wanted. So what I do is I start on a side seam and I extend the length of my thread. Then making sure I'm not interfering, I don't have bulk, I'm going to start stitching at 1 centimetre all the way through to the other seam. So now I'm going to extend the thread and cut off. Now I always do this in the same colour as my fabric, so I don't have to remove the gathering thread when I'm finished. Okay, so now extend the thread and do the same thing for the other side. Now, to make life easier on myself, I'm going to find the notch at the centre and mark it with a pin. So you'll have a single notch here, which will show you the centre front, and that's going to be a match point for us. And then there'll be a double notch at the back to match here. It's a lot easier to mark them now because they can get quite hard to find later. So then I'm going to pull the thread only from one side. So the side I'm pulling from is the back. And I'm just going to gently draw this up. Do that on one side until it has a light gather. And on the other side as well. So you need that longer stitch length so that it's not really difficult to pull this gather. Okay, so do that for the other side as well. Okay, so this lower piece is the same pattern piece for both views A and views B. I'll attach this to the view A piece with the pockets, but it's the same process if you're attaching it to the middle layer on view B. So this gathered edge is going to attach to the lower edge on the part with the pockets, so that's the wider seam. So take the part you have with the pockets and turn it inside out. And the main thing we have to make sure of is that the front is going to match to the single notch. That's because we put the pockets to the front. So if you turn your lower piece around, so the front's at the front and the back's at the back, and then get your skirt piece with the pockets and make sure the front's at the front, find the wider edge, which is the lower edge, and put it inside like so. Now find the notch at the centre and match it to that pin there. Find the notch at the back and match it to the double notches there. Now we're going to distribute this ruffle between the notch position and the side seams. So what we do is ease in or out this ruffle depending on how much fullness you have, and match a side seam. Now the easiest way I find it is making sure those seams are pushed open before you begin. Or in this case the seam will face towards the back here. I'm going to find the gather thread on this layer and pull it out of the way, and I haven't yet distributed these gathers properly, and I'm just going to secure that side seam together, and that will just hold at 1 centimetre. Oh, and my threads come undone. Let's try again. So I'm just going to do a back tack there just to secure those stitches in place, and now I'm going to start distributing this gather correctly. Just needs to be an even amount. Okay, so when you're happy that you've distributed the gather evenly on this quarter, what we're going to do is stitch these layers together directly on top of, and in actual fact you want it to be just to the side of that gather line. So now I'm just going to repeat it from the notch here back to the other side seam, and I won't bore you with this because it is a slow process adjusting all of this, but just go ahead and do that for the entire upper edge of the lower piece. So once you've reached your starting point, go to your overlocker and overlock that edge, and make sure you trim off all of this extra threads with your overlocker blade. So here is my raw edge all tidied. I don't take out my gathering thread, but you certainly can if you want. And if you have used a contrasting colour, of course, that's a really good idea. So just double check your work before we move on. So now let's work on the middle tier. Go to your overlocker, and on the short end of the middle tier, overlock just through one layer. Then take your middle tier pieces and place them right sides together, and sew a seam at either end at 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch, and then press that seam open. So now we're going to attach the lower frill to the middle frill. It doesn't matter which edge you attach it to. There is a single notch for the front and the back. And as long as that notch matches the center of the lower panels, everything is fine. So we're going to put our middle panel right side out and our lower panel wrong side out, so right side in, and we're going to match them so they're right sides together. And I'm going to pin the side seams together. I'm going to make sure the center notch matches. You want the other side seam to match. And we want the other center to match. So now, making sure my stitch length is back to normal, I'm going to attach the frill to the upper edge and then overlock tidy the edge when it's finished. When you've finished overlocking, make sure the overlocking blade trims off all of the fraying and stray threads, and just double check your work before you move on. So the next thing we need to do before we attach the top layer is to run a row of gathers along the top edge of the middle layer. So I won't bore you with that, but I'll just go ahead and do the gathering row here. I've run my gathering thread along the top part of the middle layer. And what I'm going to do now is just jump ahead and prep the top layer to make it easier down the track. So the procedure for the top tier is pretty much the same as the procedure for the middle tier. We're going to place after we've overlocked the edges on the short end, we're going to run a seam at 1 centimetre to create a circle. I've pressed the seam open here. Right, so when your top layer has its gathering thread, we're going to attach the side that doesn't have the gathering, so the bottom of it, to the skirt before we attach the gathered part to the bodice. So place this piece right sides together into the skirt that you've prepped so far. And just like we've done before, match the side seams, match the centre notches, distribute the gathers and sew it together, then overlock the edges. So I'll just move ahead and we'll come back when the seam is sewn and the edge is overlocked. So when you have finished attaching the top skirt layer, what we're left to do now is to attach the straight edge at the top to the bodice. So this is exactly the same for both views. I won't bother to re-videotape it for view B. Just go ahead and watch how we do it for view A, and it's exactly the same. So now we're going to do another gathering thread for the upper part of the piece with the pockets in it. It's exactly the same as we did before. Run a gathering thread from side seam to side seam and then we'll attach it to the bodice. Oh, and I better mention, once you have run that gathering thread, don't forget to turn your stitch length back to normal. I don't think I mentioned that last time, and it is really important. So just like before, I'm going to find the notch in the centre and mark with a pin. And the notch in the centre again. Now because this piece is cut to, you need to make sure you know which is the back before you go any further. So the side that is the longest is the back, and if you're really not sure, what I'm going to do just in case is put a second notch just right beside the first one. You need to make sure, I might actually mark that on the pattern, I'll put a double notch to mark it for the back piece. Right, so gently gather from the side to the centre. Okay, so the single notch for the front, the double notch for the back. Take your bodice and find the double notch in the centre of the back. Now the back is the part with the low dip on it. The high dip is the front. So put that inside, so we have right sides together. And match. And match the side seams. Now I just rearranged my work, so I turned it inside out, what that means, just to make sure my gathering was on top. So I'm going to come to the side seam and stitch, making sure that seam is facing towards the back and all those threads are out of the way. Basically what I'm doing is just making this act like another pair of hands for me, just securing that in place. those gathers. So just like before, I won't bother you with this part, just go ahead and attach that to the correct place. Take your time, this is the part that's going to be seen the most and you want it to look really nice. It is only a light gather at this bodice area, so you want to make sure it looks nice and even. And when it's in the right place, stitch it through. I'll just continue on. Okay, so once you have done this, go to the overlocker and overlock the edge tidy. So just use your blades starting at a side seam, and we want to tidy up that edge and just make sure you trim off all these bits of fraying and extra threads as you go. So when you've finished overlocking, go to your iron and give your garment a good press. Don't press the gathers because you'll end up flattening them out, we don't want that. And then turn the garment right side out and make sure you tie the shoulders together. I've just done a reef knot, which is right over left, left over right. And thanks for joining me with the sew along video. Thanks for buying my patterns. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to join my Facebook pattern discussion groups when you can keep up to date with the latest releases and find out what's going on. Thanks very much, and I'll see you again soon.